virtual town hall is California Congressman Adam Schiff, a stalwart champion for creators' rights in Washington, and ASCAP president and chairman of the board and beloved songwriter Paul Williams. We hope you can use this time to arm yourselves with knowledge, ask questions, and learn how you can join us at ASCAP in creating positive change for the American music community. Congressman Schiff, Paul, thank you so much for joining us. Let's begin this invaluable discussion.
Thank you so much. Mr. Chairman, welcome to ASCAP. It's my great honor on behalf of 750,000 music creators and publishers and composers and songwriters to say welcome to ASCAP. This is a rare treat for us, and with this kind of schedule you have, I'm thrilled and delighted that you could make it.
Well, thank you. It's a great pleasure to join you and your members. Having a conversation with Paul Williams is just a treat that I don't often get to do. And as a big fan of yours, Paul, it's really a pleasure.
Well, it's right back at you. And that is a boomerang affection coming right back at you because I am a fan. And as I was saying a little earlier, we meet often via Rachel Maddow, but this is nice to have a chance to actually speak with you. You know, right before we sat down, I took a look at the jurisdiction, all the organizations that are under the jurisdiction of the Intelligence Committee, Mr. Chairman. And if anything is going to intimidate you, you look at that list. And I think for our audience and for the members of ASCAP and music creators that are watching, to think that with that on your shoulders and the defense of the Constitution and the amazing work that you do, you have always been a really avid, passionate advocate of the music creator, and for that we are extremely grateful. I will pause for some unheard applause, but I guarantee you it's thunderous.
Thank you. Look, it's my great pleasure to represent so many incredibly creative talents in my district, and I have just such a love and admiration for your members all over the country. So, you know, there are a lot of parts of my job that are very hard. There are some that are also very rewarding and fulfilling and enjoyable, and advocating for the interests of the creative people that you represent is really a treat and a joy for me.
Well, it's terrific. I lived in West Hollywood for many, many years, so I was in your district for a while before I moved behind the orange curtain to Huntington Beach and all. But let's just jump in this because we're living through some amazing times right now, and your advocacy has never been needed more. The songwriters and the composers have been probably amongst the hardest hit by the pandemic, and I think that a great way to describe what has actually happened is when Sammy Kahn, who was a great lyricist and a member of ASCAP, was asked, because we're all asked what comes first, the words or the music, he said what comes first is the phone call. The phone call is where the job comes in. You know, these days the phone is not ringing because the jobs are not there. The venues have shut down. There's no touring. The music business is essentially it shut down. The sound stages are empty. Movie and TV production has essentially ended for the moment, and so many of your constituents in West Hollywood, you know, are composers that have been deeply affected by this. I know you're a great advocate for self-employed individuals like songwriters and composers who basically are gig workers. I mean, these are gig-related works. These are specific projects. So thank you for taking up the cause on behalf of all of us, but specifically those members. Can you tell us a little bit about what's been done so far as COVID relief on the Hill?
Well, absolutely. When we were designing the first CARES Act package, I mean, some of the first steps we took were very bipartisan. They were designed to provide resources for our hospitals and our health clinics, and our next tranche of legislation dealt with the need to do testing and tracing, things that we still don't have in sufficient numbers and speed right now. But the first major economic package was the CARES Act. And as we were working on the CARES Act, it became very apparent to me, hearing from a lot of your members and others, that there were millions and millions of people who were going to be left out of unemployment compensation because they don't traditionally get it if they're part of the gig economy, if they're freelancers, if they work contract to contract, if they don't have the traditional W-2 employment. And it was vitally important that we make sure that they not be left behind. So I helped to organize an effort in the House to include people who were independent contractors and gig workers and freelancers, and we did. So for the first time in this enhanced unemployment benefit of $600 a week, we covered people who had that kind of work. But what we have found subsequent to that is that there are still people being left out. And this is a subset of people who have mixed income. So they may have some W-2 income, but traditionally got most of their income on a 1099. So they may have, for example, been getting some small amount of royalties from year to year on a W-2, but most of their income has come from periodic jobs, from, as you say, getting that phone call. And as a result of having a modest amount of W-2 income, but losing all of their 1099 income, they were getting left out. They were either getting very little unemployment compensation or none at all. And so when we discovered this group of people with mixed income were really being hurt by this, we looked to see, is this something the states can remedy on their own? Do we need to write new law? And I think it's the conclusion that we're going to have to write new law to fix this. So I introduced the bill this week to do that, to try to address those with mixed income. I'm hoping to move this bill either as a standalone bill or probably even better if we can make it a part of this package that we're now negotiating between Democrats and Republicans. And so, yes, we were able to help many millions, maybe tens of millions of people who are gig workers, but there were still a great many who were left out, who have mixed income, and we're trying to fix that now.
One of the things that in the body of your answer to that question, you answered a question that I was going to ask a little later on, which I think is really important. People really want to know, is it going to make a difference when they reach out to their congressman, if they're writing emails or sending letters or making phone calls? And based on what you just said, it's incredibly important for our members to become really active in their advocacy.
Oh, that's absolutely true. In many respects, people didn't bring to our attention in Congress, hey, the way the CARES Act was written, it helped a lot of people, but there's still a group that didn't get helped. And we need the help. And, frankly, when I talk to colleagues about this, and I would say, take three different people, all who earn, let's say, $50,000 a year. One person who got it from the same employer, traditional employment relationship. One person who got it, they're an independent contractor, the cumulative amount of the different jobs they did, they earned $50,000 last year. And then one person who had mixed income. They had 10,000 from one kind of work and 40 from another. Well, those first two people may get the same amount of unemployment compensation, and the third person may get left out completely. That's really a revelation, I think, to many members of Congress. We wouldn't know about it if people weren't advocating for themselves and organizations like ASCAP weren't bringing it to our attention. So very important, but also, as you can imagine, there's great competition for help right now. So many millions of Americans are unemployed. So many millions more have small businesses that are at risk of going under. And if people don't advocate for their members and for themselves, they're much less likely to get the help that they really need. So it's enormously important to reach out to your representatives, to also use the force multiplier that ASCAP is to help educate Congress and advocate for help.
It's the most amazing feeling to walk the halls and to know that you can really make a difference, walk into somebody's office and have a one-on-one conversation. Do you think most of your colleagues really understand that the way our world has collapsed in the sense that it has, that this could go on for months and months for music creators, that we're going to need relief that is not just a quick Band-Aid, but we're going to need help possibly for a long time to come. Certainly it's going to be probably well into 2021.
I think that there's certainly some recognition of this. I think most of the members of Congress understand that businesses and workers in different industries that require a venue where people congregate were the first to lose their work and will be the last to regain it. There's a general recognition of that. I mean, everybody can go by, for example, their local movie house and see that it's closed and it's been closed a long time. but there's obviously unique issues affecting the music industry. There are unique venues in my district, like the Troubadour, but in other places too, in Tennessee, in New York, and elsewhere, where the impact is much greater because of the concentration of that kind of work and employment and creativity. And for that reason, we need to reach out to these other representatives from the country. Their constituents may not be as directly impacted, but if the music goes away, their constituents are going to be deeply impacted. And what they also need to understand, and this is something we struggle even in the best of times with, is when members of Congress think about the music industry, like when they think about the film or TV industry, they think about the stars. They think about the mega artists, the Taylor Swifts, and they think they don't really need our help. They don't realize that most songwriters and composers are just trying to make a living doing what they love.
Exactly.
And it's obviously true of most people in the entertainment industry. They're not all Tom Cruise.
And we're not all shopping for that little place in Malibu. The fact is that it's a blue collar business for so many.
Absolutely.
What we do is, I've always said, work and all, because right now we're at a point where to physically stay alive, we social distance. We keep that distance between us. But to stay mentally healthy, to stay emotionally connected, we need a connection that I think music provides in a fashion that is just for me, no matter how much I clamp down a feeling, if you show a collie running through the grass and the music is just right behind it, it will unleash emotions from me, the people that I've been studying for years and the like. I think that our music is absolutely needed. I think one of the things we're going to need to get the music back up and running is, I think that we're going to need clear national guidelines from the national health, public health officials on exactly how to do this. And I think that it's an area that really needs to be addressed. How do we gather? How do we gather safely? I know there's some basics on that are out there right now that are keeping us alive, but I think to figure out how to move a large amount of people into a venue is something we're going to need help with.
I agree. And look, some things are going to simply take time. The parts of the country where the virus is so widespread, we're going to really have to take, quite drastic steps to tame this virus and protect the public. Other places are doing better. Sadly, not too many of them, but there are some states that are doing better, where the conditions may be right to reopen venues that you can't reopen elsewhere. But when we do reopen, we need to make sure that we still maintain good standards, that we follow best practices, and we're going to need guidance from experts like the CDC. It's I think so debilitating when the administration tries to silence the voices of the CDC when the president wants to give these briefings now again because he doesn't like his poll numbers. Well, fine, but he a lot of what he says just plain ain't true. Sometimes it's downright destructive. And Anthony Fauci may be down the street, and Dr. Birx may be in the next room, but if you don't get to hear from them, and what you do get to hear isn't accurate, it doesn't help. In fact, it's affirmatively hurtful. The CDC, does some great work in establishing these guidelines, but some of those guidelines have been suppressed by this administration. We also need good information about how we can congregate and when we can congregate and what the circumstances are. So we got to make sure that those experts are able to communicate freely with the public.
Recently heard Dr. Ho speak, who was the gentleman responsible for taking the AIDS and turning it from a death sentence into a chronic disease that could be treated and all. But he spoke about the fact that these sequential shutdowns, have been so ineffective. Whereas if we all shut down as a nation at once, and was I believe again Rachel Maddow, I think was asked very specifically, is it too late? And he said, no, it's now or never. We must, in fact, just make our physical, bringing this curve down immediate.
One thing, Paul, we saw, this goes back to the last pandemic, but it's a good abject lesson for us. Those parts of the country in the last pandemic that retain their protections the longest, the social distancing, the wearing of masks,
Yep.
that took their time to reopen when they were ready, they recovered faster than those places that raced to reopen, because in those places that raced to reopen, they had a resurgence of the virus. And sadly, that's exactly what we've seen. Those parts of the country that raced to reopen when they didn't have the testing and they didn't have the tracing and they weren't ready. And then you add to it all the conflicting messages about wearing masks or not wearing masks. And it was a recipe for the disaster that we're currently experiencing. It didn't have to be this way. You know,
No.
we went into this pandemic, the nation on earth best prepared for a pandemic, I think, by any objective measure. But sadly, we've had, I think, the worst results.
Yeah. You know, one of the side effects of this pandemic and the quarantine is something I want to talk to you about. You know, we learned this summer that our nation has so much work to do to advance racial equality. I think that one of I'm reluctant to say gifts of the quarantine, but of the pandemic, but perhaps a gift of the quarantine is that we were a captive audience. And as a captive audience all at home, you know, we saw something on television with a knee on the neck of a gentleman that we could not turn away. And it exploded into what I believe is hopefully a tipping point and a real change, you know, where we can really change as a country and really grow up. You know, I thought when Obama was elected president, there was that moment when it was like my country is now grown up. I think we have immense challenges right now. The House passed, and excuse me if I glance at notes now and then. While I'm the voice of these questions at the moment, there are some spectacular minds that I'm honored to work with who have major input to these questions, and they're all important subjects. And rather than looking good, I'd rather do a good job, which is, you know, that's what 30 years sobriety does. I try to do that now. The House passed the Justice and Policing Act and is waiting on the Senate to take it up. Is there more legislative activity we can expect from the House on these issues? Are there other ways our representatives in Congress are joining us in this moment to ensure things finally start to where we really start to change? I am so proud of ASCAP. Mr. Chairman, I am so proud of ASCAP because we have stepped up to the plate to be totally supportive, you know, of the Black community and work collectively to learn, to grow, to promote diversity. I'd love to hear your thoughts on where we go next and how we stay really effective and improve.
Yeah. Well, we took up in the House the Justice and Policing Act, as you mentioned, probably the most far-reaching police reform Congress has ever taken up. It would do away with the kind of qualified immunity that has protected so many police officers that have committed egregious violence. It outlaws racial profiling. It bans chokeholds and no-knock warrants in drug cases. It requires reform in police departments. It incentivizes oversight and reform. And we need to continue to fight to get that passed. At the moment, it is in the Senate graveyard, Mitch McConnell's graveyard, where so many other bills go to die. But we're not going to give up until that becomes the law of the land. It's important to recognize, though, that racism within policing is only one very small subset of a much larger problem. Racism within policing is only part of a problem of racism within the criminal justice system more broadly, which includes racism in sentencing, problems with cross-racial IDs, and a whole host of other issues. And of course, the criminal justice system is just one institution. I'm working on a bill right now that I hope to introduce fairly soon to deal with the problem of racism and bias in the delivery of healthcare. It is, you know, it's bad enough that we're seeing in this pandemic such terrible disparate outcomes for Black Americans, for Latino Americans, and others. It's bad enough when you can't get access to good care, but it's also makes the problem that much worse that even when you get access, if the care you get is unequal, inequitable because of the color of your skin. And that happens too. And I have a bill that is designed to address that problem of inequity in the performance of healthcare within the system. It's my hope, Paul, that one of the results of this pandemic is that as you say, it gives us a chance to confront major problems facing the country and build the country back better. As we emerge from this pandemic, just as we have emerged from other crises, World War II and the Great Depression, the Vietnam War, we've made efforts to build the country back better. And we need to seize this opportunity as well to build the country back better.
It's a nice little bright spot in the midst of this to see the Supreme Court come back with the decisions they have, for example, with the LGBTQ issues, and where before that decision, you could get married, if you were gay, but you could lose your job the next day, and there was no recourse. I was very pleased to see that decision come down from the Supreme Court. I want to jump to something that is key for all music creators right now. Songwriters are heavily regulated. Our income is we're the most heavily regulated small business owners probably in this country and all. And when it comes to small businessman, I'm a perfect foot ornament for ASCAP. I'm a small businessman. So but we're heavily regulated. Our income is more regulated than Google, Amazon, Apple, Spotify, Facebook, Netflix, radio and television. We're songwriters. We're not really a threat to the nation, but we are deeply, deeply, deeply regulated. And part of the reason is a consent decree, which we operate under, which is an agreement with the Department of Justice, which was created in 1941. 1941. The internet was not exactly, music was very different. It's all changed, and yet we continue to be constricted, by this consent decree. We're trying to modernize the consent decree to level the playing field. When we negotiate with tech and media giants, they have the advantage they love, and they love the status quo because they can kind of keep their thumb on the scale with that. And we just want to make it better. We want to make people, what's important, what it's ultimately about is food on the table and gas in the car, for the hardworking songwriters who are providing the music for this country. Do you agree that the DOJ should consider the imbalance as they review the consent decrees and try to give songwriters a fair chance?
Absolutely. Look, FDR was a great president, but there are a few things that have changed since 1941. And the consent decree ought to change with them. I don't know that you can point to any other industry that has changed more in terms of the modality of how that industry performs than the music industry. It has changed with breakneck speed. Even within the last 10 years, there have been dramatic change. And so I do think we need to revisit the consent decree and revise it. And I know what a priority it is for songwriters and composers. It's part of frankly, a broader problem and challenge. And that is, you have a concentration of great power and wealth, sometimes in the hands of a few companies, but even more as a general matter, which has led to a historic and now yawning gap between rich and poor in this country, with a middle class that is struggling more than ever to survive. And part of addressing that is giving individuals more collective bargaining power vis-a-vis these massive companies with their concentration of wealth. I think the attacks on organized labor, for example, of the last several decades are part of the reason why we have such huge disparities in wealth now. But you can also see it in the music industry where, how can an individual songwriter ever hope to negotiate from a position of strength with a behemoth like Google or Spotify or Pandora? You just can't. And so I think it's important to work within organizations like ASCAP, but also it's important that Congress and the administration, the Justice Department, look at the mechanism with which songwriters and composers are marginalized economically, The fact that things have changed so dramatically in the decades since we kind of structured compensation in the music industry, and figure out how do we bring this up to the modern age? How do we, equalize the bargaining position so that we can continue to enjoy all this creative talent. I don't know about you, Paul. I've probably never listened to more music in my life than right now, um,
Yes.
and thank God for it. It has so many wonderful effects, I think, on us all, on our mental health, on our associations with people and places and times of our lives, and so. I think we have a huge stake in the
Yeah.
continued success of the industry.
We appreciate that. Yeah, one more time, you have been officially, many, many years ago, you were officially dubbed by my camp as a warrior for the light, and you prove it again and again and again. I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the clever changes that have occurred as far as music creators trying to be heard. All of a sudden, the drive-in movie is looking to be a safe way to go and hear a concert. And you don't need a drive-in movie. All you need is a big field, but the drive-in movie has bathrooms and a stand to pick up some popcorn and the like. But I have to tell you that I love WebEx and Zoom, and there are two areas of my life that are incredibly important: music creation and of course recovery. And both of those groups have found a way to use this wonderful sees sampler of whether it's spiritual giants in recovery or people trying to get their music heard. I wonder if you've experienced any of the interesting ways that people have jumped online and done at-home concerts and some of the streaming performances. I wonder if you've experienced any of that. And I want to ask you about maybe a favorite song. I want to hear a little bit about your taste in music, and it's because it's going to make this world a better place for us all to know.
Well, I've certainly seen, although I haven't had a chance to watch one of the on-screen concerts yet, and I'm long overdue. But I have seen news stories about how people are, performing now, and they're doing it remotely. I was very proud to see, like, the LA Choir, for example, singing together in a remarkable performance where they all sang separately, and but nonetheless, it was through the miracle of technology turned into a beautiful choral music. But I think in terms of, happy to share with you my own music tastes, which are frankly extraordinarily diverse.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
they range from the classical to Kings of Leon to Tim Matthews, Billy Joel, Steely Dan. And I was in a Pearl Jam phase for a long time, uh, and but I just give you one illustration of a song that I played recently, which I hadn't listened to for years. But it's to me a perfect illustration of what music can do. It's a Herb Alpert song called "This Guy's in Love with You."
sure.
It was our first dance at my wedding, but even more significant in a way is it was one of my mother's favorite songs, which was one of the reasons why I wanted to make it our first dance song at my wedding. My mother passed away several years ago, but I can't listen to that song without thinking of her, and without seeing an image of her walking around the house, humming that to herself or singing that to herself. And that's the thing about music. It can so vividly bring you back to times of your life and moments. It's so evocative of things that are going on. I can't imagine seeing films without music. And by the way, while on the subject of films and music, I do have a recommendation for your members. And I may have been the last person to see this film, so if I am, forgive me. But Searching for Sugarman is my
Great.
best movie viewing recommendation of the pandemic so far. I didn't see it when it came out. I just saw it recently, and I thought it was fantastic. But it also, on the point of the topic today, tells you about something about music compensation, because
Sure.
the subject of that film was left out for a very long time.
Yeah. In a full circle, really lovely moment, I have to tell you that the past president of ASCAP, Hal David, wrote the words to "This Guy's in Love with You," and
Uh,
it's a Bacharach David song and all. And to watch Hal sing that song to his bride, it was one of the great pleasures in the amount of time that I was able to spend with Hal. It's a great song. I would like to bring up one other thing that I talk about wandering the halls of Congress and what it feels like and all. One of the things, I mean, there's a line in it. It's like pulling teeth to get me to ever mention one of my own songs, but there's a line in one of my songs that says, "Who said that every wish would be heard and answered if wished on the morning star?" If I have a wish, and I would imagine it's something that may ring true to you as well. There was a time in Congress, in the Senate, when things like the Americans with Disabilities Act were created by Ted Kennedy and Orrin Hatch, and that these two men who were best of friends, argued about everything, when they were on the floor. But Orrin told me one time, he said that, Ted would come over after he just lambasted me. He would come over and say, "How'd I do?" And he said, "I told you were great." It was, then they'd go and Ted would have a drink and Orrin would have a Diet Coke or an orange juice and all. But you have such character and caring, and I know it exists across the aisle. I have friends on both sides of the aisle, and I wonder if you'd care to talk a little bit about that gulf between the two sides of the aisle right now, and ways to effectively heal that. And it's such a huge task. I'd like to hear your thoughts on it because it's so important for the work that has to be done ahead.
it is so important. And, I've often made the observation that what's really holding back our country is our broken form of governance right now. And the kind of bipartisanship that you're talking about, the collaboration that you're talking about, it does still go on. It is more rare, tragically, much more rare. To give you an illustration, for 18 years and up until he left the Congress 2 years ago, a very conservative Texan named John Culberson and I worked together on NASA every year. He was the senior most Republican on the subcommittee that funded NASA. I was the senior most Democrat. We were inseparable. We both have a love for science and space science. And I love, for example, the work that the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in my district does. And he loved the work that, that manned spaceflight and other efforts in his Texas area did. And we could not be parted even by NASA, much to NASA's chagrin sometimes. Now, we didn't talk about issues where we had strong disagreements. We disagreed about taxes and immigration and just about everything else. We looked for the common ground and worked together. And those kind of partnerships still occur, but they're all too rare. I'll be very candid with you, though, Paul. The tone is really set from the top. As long as we have a president who is set on dividing us, we are going to be divided, not just as a Congress, but as a country. And so I'm not particularly optimistic about the rebirth of bipartisanship with Donald Trump as president, because that is simply not where he's coming from. And I don't think it will ever be where he's coming from.
Yeah, I get you. Well, we have about 15 minutes left, and before we gathered together in this screen, we spoke to some of the members of the audience, put forward some questions. So I thought I'd love to take a look at these and maybe ask a couple of questions that the audience members have suggested. In the pandemics, if the pandemic's effects last for several more months, wait a minute. No, I did look at these before, but I'm realizing some of these have already covered. No. What member of what music? Wait a minute. Wait. Songwriters and composers spend our entire lives trying to get our music heard. But right now, a lot of us are thinking about how to make sure our voices are heard in the political process. We touched on this earlier, but what is your advice to music creators looking to make a difference in their communities? Grassroots.
Well, the kind of the hierarchy of effective ways to advocate. The very best is something that's just not possible right now, which is meeting together with your representatives, local, state, federal. What we're doing right now is probably the next best thing, which is a video conference. I've been doing a lot of video conferences with my constituents. I've been doing video coffees, video town halls, telephone town halls. The personal interaction really matters. It's one thing when you read about or you hear abstractly, oh, this is a really hard time for performing artists. It's a hard time for songwriters. It's a hard time for composers. They were the first to lose their jobs and they'll be the last to regain them. It's another when you talk to someone directly who says, I lost my job. I lost it, back in February. And there's just no sign of when I'm going to get it back. I don't get much unemployment because I have mixed income, or here's my circumstance. Seeing someone, hearing their story, it really makes a difference. So, that kind of personal connection is really important. It's important to work through organizations as well, because you don't want to have to necessarily reinvent the wheel. And the organizations can direct your focus, and if the priority, for example, there are real economic lifeline issues right now for songwriters and composers, but there are also longer term issues like the consent decree. Working through organizations can help prioritize, okay, this is really what we need to focus on right now. So in addition to the kind of in-person Zoom kind of meetings, emails, calls to offices, our offices are still open, even if they're not people all the time. Make your voice heard.
Yeah, once again, advocacy, be a part of it. The nightmare is that all of a sudden, you're my age and you're looking back and you go, could I have made a difference if I had stepped up to the plate and been a part of the community that is actually, and anytime we've ever gone to Washington, we're so welcome, and a great partnership has been with the Library of Congress, and the fact that every year, and I know you've been there to our events there, when we spend one night of letting a congressman or having a congressman introduce a songwriter to play a song that has meant something.
I got to introduce Bill Withers one time, which was such a treat. I told a story that night about how I was on the light rail in Pasadena, and there was a father singing to his young daughter, who she looked to be about 9. And every time he tries singing something, she says, "I don't like that one." And he would try a different song, and she would say, "I didn't like that one either." And I didn't know these people, but I felt as a member of Congress, I could interrupt their conversation. So I did, and I said, "Well, let me try this." And I started singing "Ain't No Sunshine When She's Gone." And that little girl looked up at me with those big eyes, and she said, "Yeah, I don't like that one either." But I told Bill it wasn't his song. It must have been the way I sang it.
When Bill was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, he walked out, he stood at the lecture, and he looked at the audience, and he says, "This is the biggest AA meeting I ever attended." It was an amazing man, and a dear man, and a sweet man, who I saw for the first time at the Troubadour, which is still.
Is that right? Wow.
In West Hollywood. Yeah. Oh my God, what an amazing talent. Okay, I'm going to turn this is I would not have asked this, but I've got to ask it. You've always been a strong advocate for the rights of music creators. Oh, no, wait a minute. It's the next one below. Amongst music creators, amongst the people that you follow in this wonderful world of entertainment, if you were going to pick one of them that might make sense to sit next to you in Congress. In other words, if you were going to pick a songwriter or a singer, an artist, or a member of a band, to run for Congress, who do you think would be a great choice?
Well, when I thought you were my constituent, I was not going to say you, But now that I know you're behind the orange curtain, I'm going to say Paul Williams would be an excellent choice.
Oh, I was hoping I'd hear that. I admit.
Well,
I
I'm
admit.
telling you, he would have to move here and become a citizen. But I'll tell you who I think is a great example is Bono. I met with him a number of times to talk about the work that he does fighting HIV/AIDS and malaria, the enormous philanthropic work that he has done. And what I have been so impressed about among many other things is his in-depth knowledge of these issues. He'll come to advocate for funding. I sit on the State and Foreign Operations Committee, funding for international efforts to fight disease. And he often knows the subject matter better than most members of Congress. I would love to have him apply for U.S. citizenship and run for Congress, but only if you're not willing, Paul.
I'm not going to run. This is the greatest job that I've ever had. This is the most adult thing I've ever done in my life as well. It requires a certain discipline, and it's just an honor. It's a great honor. I was elected in 2009, and one of my greatest memories is shortly after I was elected. I went to the White House for the Gershwin Prize. Actually, it was Hal David and Burt Bacharach were being given the Gershwin Prize, and met for the first time, President Obama and the First Lady. And I had just been elected president of ASCAP. He had just been elected president of the United States. And I said, this may sound outrageous, but would you call me Mr. President, Mr. President? He said, Mr. President, it would be an honor. And it's one of those little memories you take and you hang up, in your office and go, that's something I will always remember and all. I have to tell you, I will always remember this conversation as well. We've met before. We've never really had a chance to have a real conversation like this, and it's a real honor. I will tell you that there is a certain people mistake kindness for weakness sometimes, but it's a foolish thing to do. You have an elegance of kindness and a caring, and the work that you're doing on a daily basis, not only for us as music creators, but what you're doing for all of us as citizens of the United States is not something that I'll ever have enough time or language skills to properly thank you. It's what you've done has been remarkable, and we are forever grateful.
Well, thank you very much. That means a lot to me. And if I'm allowed to make one more plug, for those that have already seen Searching for Sugarman, you also have to see the documentary of the life of Paul Williams, which I had an opportunity to see at an ASCAP event some years ago, and it was absolutely riveting. I was a fan before, I was an even bigger fan after, but really it's a remarkable film. And you have led such a remarkable life and continue to, and your leadership at ASCAP has been tremendous. So thank you for all you're doing, representing so many of my constituents, but people all over the country, such enormous talent. Thank you for enriching my life and so many millions of others.
When this opens up again, we need to go break bread and continue this conversation.
You're on.
Sarah, we will give it back to you, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Paul. Congressman Schiff, thank you so much for your time, your candor, and your steadfast support of not just creators, but of all your constituents.